of attendance?
I'm going to let Mr. Newberry do that for me. He has the roll call sheet. Thank you, sir.
Chair Beatty. Commissioner Humphrey.
Here.
Commissioner Ward.
Here.
Commissioner Cohn.
Yeah.
Commissioner Broyles. Commissioner Clayton.
Here.
Commissioner Doppler.
Here.
Commissioner Jackson.
Here.
Chair Beatty.
Here.
Councilmember Brost. Mayor Bolin.
Here.
Thank you.
Tonight on the agenda, we have one public hearing item, one letter of recommendation, one information report, 3 correspondence items, and 1 other item. Can I get an approval of the minutes from August 2nd?
I move that we accept the minutes from August 7th as presented.
Motion by Commissioner Ward and second by Commissioner Helfrey. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Minutes are approved. Thank you. Does the department have any opening comments?
A couple, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, and I'll be brief as possible. To the other members of the commission, you may have heard a new name called to tonight's roll. That would be Mr. Clayton. He is our newest member to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and we'd like to welcome him. And secondly, we were thinking Mr. Young would not be here tonight. He had a competing meeting, but he is here tonight, and we appreciate him squeezing us in. He's had a very busy day, so I just wanted to acknowledge Mr. Young's presence and helping us out tonight.
Thank you. Let's see here. Do we have any speakers for the public comment session? It looks like Mr. Marquardt has his hand raised.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. I will promote him into the meeting.
And Mr. Chair, just so everyone's aware, we do limit speakers during the public comment period of the agenda to no more than 5 minutes. I will be timing for that purpose. And so just wanted to advise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, it says his device isn't working. He cannot hear the meeting.
Is his volume up on his device? Has he checked the volume on his device?
Let me message him back. And
Mr. Chair, while you're doing that, Mr. Newberry, Ms. Broyles just came into the meeting as well.
Mr. Marquardt, can you hear us at all still? Or yet?
He's also showing as muted.
Yeah. Now he's video. There he goes.
All right, I can't hear the meeting, so if I'm on right now, if you could just nod your head yes to let me know that I'm on.
We
Thank
can hear you.
Well, my name is Scott Marquardt. I own the property at 162 Strecker Road, and that's in Ward 2. I am here tonight to discuss one of the information items on the agenda for tonight's meeting regarding the special conditions or special circumstances overlay district, which So Mayor Bolin has directed me to provide all communication to the city through City Administrator Steve Cross. So last week I provided Mr. Cross with 3 separate documents and asked him to provide those to you. To date, I have not received any response for any of my 3 emails or the voicemail that I left. Did you receive those documents?
We have.
So I'd like to comment tonight on several of the points that were made in update number 1 to PZ 10-21 through 19-21, which is the Special Circumstances Overlay District. In question number 1, the Department of Public Works and the Department of Planning are already preventing maintenance of the property at 210 Strecker Road. An application was submitted per the department's directive and all of requested information was provided, but no response was issued by the department. Furthermore, the department stated that the SCOD is only intended for subdivisions, but it's already being applied differently. So how can we be assured that going forward, this will only be applied to subdivisions? And number 2, question number 2, response number 2. There's one property at 1651 Idle Rock that does not appear to be developed, and it may not have been through the St. Louis County process. This property is not included in the proposed list of properties, while all other properties that look similar are included. So I was just curious about that. And number 3, all documentation that I was able to find, all those documents are available at 210strecker.com. So that's 210strecker.com. And it's in reference, or in number 4 is in reference to time and costs. This was included in the documents that you should have received by email last week. It is our understanding that of the already passed municipal code, the SCOD does create a significant burden for landowners that wish to maintain their property. Number 5, the process to remove the SCOD will be just as, if not more lengthy than this process to get the SCOD added to a property. So it's going to be a lengthy process if anyone ever wants to remove the SCOD. And number 6, the white paper is available at 210strecker.com. There are no authors listed or sources cited to this document. My request for this information received an overly vague response from Mayor Bolin that it was authored by, and I quote, several individuals, including an expert. I thought that was a pretty vague response there. Number 7, I don't have any comments on that. Number 8, there are no current easements in place to permit the construction of the sidewalk. So any easements for such must be acquired before plans can be finalized. But the existing plans try to minimize soil disturbance, but it's still going to require excavation for the installation of new utilities, a drain or a fence or anything. Number 9, I'm the owner of 162 Strecker Road. On February 19th, we hired Environmental Works to perform a phase 1 environmental site assessment on their property. Their conclusion does not indicate that there is any history of contaminants on the property. Despite my vast research, I've never found a sample that indicates there are contaminants at the site. And the response provided by the department is unsubstantiated. I'd like to see any data that supports the department's statement otherwise. Number 10, I have no comment. Number 11 is the grid that was requested by Mayor Bolin. It may answer some of the questions that the commissioners have about a particular property, and it may help clarify the differences between the properties. However, the grid is not the same as the criteria for consideration that was outlined by the commission. These criteria are available in the packet that I provided to Mr. Cross on September 1st and that you should have received. Number 12 is regarding the letter to Mrs. Phillips, and that was in that same packet of information. The next point on the update is update number 2, and it is in regards to a meeting that the department had with the EPA. It would be nice if the department would provide this information to the public with access to the notes and minutes from that meeting. I know you want to make an educated and appropriate decision, and that a decision that you can support with credible data. And I'm just here to help you sort through the data available. Please feel free to contact me with any questions that you have regarding any information that I have listed.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have any other members in attendance who would like to speak tonight?
Mr. Chair, if I could just give a brief instruction, any of those attending tonight's meeting via Zoom, if you would like to address the commission during the public comment session, please use the raise hand feature or place something in the chat to let us know that you'd like to speak. Thank you.
Okay, my phone doesn't work. We can't hear anything. My phone doesn't work.
It's your phone?
Mhm.
Mr. Chair, I'm not seeing anyone raise their hand in the chat.
All right. Okay, so if no one else would like to speak, hold on. Getting back to the agenda here. We have one item for public hearing. And all right, in the city of Wildwood, public hearings are truly intended to accept comments and questions concerning this item. Since this request is being presented at a public hearing, no action is planned on this item tonight, and consideration of it is to be taken no earlier than October 4th, 2021. This approach ensures that the members of the Planning and Zoning Commission will hear all opinions before taking any action. The city's Department of Planning will address the comments, questions, and concerns that are raised tonight and include them as part of their formal recommendation to the Planning and Zoning Commission. The commission will allow all parties adequate time to present their position. Those in attendance via the Zoom webinar platform should use the raise hand feature to indicate you wish to speak at this hearing, or indicate in the chat feature that you would like to speak. A team member will add you to the list of speakers that will then be communicated to me as chair, and I will invite you to speak when it is your turn. In addition, information on this item can be found on the city's website at www.cityofwildwood.com. The commission would like to thank you for your cooperation and participation in tonight's hearings. Mr. Runich.
Mr. Chair, with your permission, I'd like to have Mr. Newberry read the request into the record.
All right, Mr. Newberry.
Thank you. PZ 24-21, City of Wildwood Planning and Zoning Commission, care of Department of Planning, City Hall, 16860 Main Street, Wildwood, Missouri, 63040. A request for the consideration of possible changes to the regulations that are associated with Chapter 415.030 definitions, Chapter 415.090 NU non-urban residence district, Chapter 415.110 R1 1 acre residence district, Chapter 415.120 R1A 22,000 square foot residence district, Chapter 415.130 R2 15,000 square foot residence district, Chapter 415.140 R3 10,000 square foot residence district, Chapter 415.150 R4 7,500 square foot residence district, and Chapter 415.160 R6A 4,500 square foot residence district of the City of Wildwood's zoning ordinance that are intended to clarify the allowances and or prohibitions for short-term rentals within the community, all wards.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Do we have any comments on this?
Mr. Chair, if I may, I'd like to provide a brief explanation of the primer that's been provided for the benefit of the Planning and Zoning Commission members and those in attendance and others with interest in this particular item. I would also note that John Young, our city attorney, is available for comments and questions as well relating to this particular topic. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, since the inception of the city, the allowance for certain activities in residential districts of this particular community have been restricted. The residential districts sit atop the hierarchical pyramid, so to speak, of zoning district designations, meaning it is the most protected set of zoning district designations in the city of Wildwood. At the top of that, so to speak, is the NU non-urban resident district. And then as you go to more dense or intense residential districts, other permitted and conditional uses are added. One of those uses has never been short-term rentals, meaning those that are characterized these days by Airbnb. The interpretation that prohibits such is done through a set of definitions that relate to single-family dwelling, family, household, and hotel, accessory dwelling, and others. The interpretations of those definitions bring to the conclusion that short-term rentals are not authorized in the city of Wildwood. Over the years, there have been occasions when this particular discussion has become more prominent and involved not only the city attorney, the Department of Planning, but our code enforcement staff. Most recently, one of our city council members questioned how the interpretation was made and just the understanding of it for a layperson, a property owner, whatever the situation may be. The city administrator, the city attorney, and the Department of Planning held a conversation and thought it appropriate, instead of making the interpretation difficult, to actually make a more clearer statement relative to short-term rentals. The intent tonight is not necessarily to support alterations to accommodate them. There are many reasons why the Department of Planning and past city councils and planning and zoning commissions have not supported such. But more so tonight, at least from the interpretation of the Department of Planning, the intent is to provide a more clear statement that does not require the interpretation of 4 or more definitions to lead to the conclusion that short-term rentals are prohibited within the city of Wildwood's residential zoning districts. Therefore, tonight, the department is seeking comments from the Planning and Zoning Commission, as well as the general public relating to this topic. Those comments will be used in the formulation of the department's information report, which contains its recommendation, and will be the basis for action by the Planning and Zoning Commission on this matter. Mr. Chair and members of the commission, as promised, a brief explanation. Certainly, again, Mr. Newberry, Mr. Young, and I are available for any comments or questions at this time. And after the public has had an opportunity to comment, we will also be available again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. Any comments from the commission? Ms. Broyles or Commissioner Broyles? You're muted. Commissioner Broyles, you're muted.
I apologize. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could someone define for me short-term rentals? I mean, I know the definition, but what is the time frame on what does short mean?
Ms. Broyles, I'm going to ask City Attorney Young to comment on that. I believe there's court case or court precedent that is available.
Before he shares that, I know there are some people that are awaiting their house being built. And so they decide to move from wherever they are to a short-term rental until their homes are finished being built. Are we talking about that as well? Mr. Young?
Generally speaking, when you're talking about short-term rentals, you're really referencing rentals that are less than 30 days in duration. So you're truly talking more in the vacation type rental scenario.
Thank you.
Mayor Bolin?
One thing I would add, our city actually has rental properties, not a lot, but we have some. And so to the extent someone may want to be near the home that they are building in Wildwood, there are existing options that are available for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes, sir.
Just one item to add. I think it's important to note that at least in the non-urban resident district, which often is inclusive of most of the rural areas of this community, there is a provision to accommodate bed and breakfast establishments. That accommodation is a conditional use permit in the NU non-urban resident district. So there are provisions, but just doing it without the benefit of the protection that's provided by a conditional use permit is what is prohibited. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Broyles, did you want to respond?
I lost my train of thought while I was listening to that. So it may come back to me. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question.
Commissioner Ward? Yes.
Okay, so sometimes Airbnbs can be longer rental possibilities. We think of them sometimes as just, maybe a week or two, but sometimes they can be extended. If someone is working on a project or something, they can come in and stay for 3 or 4 months. Is there a way that we differentiate that scenario if we were trying to not have Airbnbs?
Ms. Ward, again, I will allow Mr. Young to comment first, and then I do have a follow-up as well.
Yeah, so the idea here is, first, I want to make it very clear that the Airbnb is a company that provides a medium, so we're not regulating the company itself. What we're trying to prohibit is the use of residential property in residential districts for the housing of transient guests. And that would be basically operating a hotel, which is a commercial use in a residential district. And a transient guest defined by statute is one who is staying 30 days or less. So if someone finds a rental property that they want to live at for 3 months using any company they want through a website or what have you is fine. What we're really regulating is the use of residential property for the commercial purpose of housing transient guests.
Thank you.
And I will say that I have seen on the website of that company where you can set minimum lengths of stays. Do we have any other comments?
Mr. Chair, if I could, just to kind of give you practical experience, when the Department of Planning or Department of Public Works receives a complaint about a potential short-term rental, and we contact the property owner, that is the first question we ask, is that what is the length of the rental agreement, so to speak? And if they say it's over 30 days, then for the most part, the application of this prohibition is not applied.
Thank you. If there's no other comments, can I get a motion to close the public hearing?
Mr. Chair, if we may, could we just ask those in attendance if you'd like to speak on this particular matter during the public hearing portion? If you would please raise your hand or add something in the chat feature so we know you're interested, and we'll promote you to a panelist. Mr. Chair, I don't see anyone with a raised hand feature or initiating a new chat. So again, per your first comment, the department will respectfully request a motion, second, and voice vote to close the public hearing. Thank you.
I move that we close the public hearing.
Thank you, Commissioner Ward. Second by Councilman Brost. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, the motion passes. Thank you. All right. Next on the agenda, letter of recommendation. Who's going to read this? Mr. Newberry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. PZ 25-21, Patrick Tuith, 251 Cherry Hills Meadows Drive, Wildwood, Missouri 63040. is seeking the review and action of the Planning and Zoning Commission on the requested installation of an outdoor game court, which will be 25 feet by 38 feet in size and to be located at 251 Cherry Hills Meadows Drive, locator number 24V340628, R3 10,000 square foot residence district with planned environment unit PEU. This request is to be reviewed in accordance with chapter 415.140 R3 10,000 square foot residence district regulations of the city of Wildwood zoning code, which establishes standards and requirements for outdoor game courts relating to their considerations by the Planning and Zoning Commission. In this instance, the proposed game court is to be situated on this 0.2 acre parcel of ground to the west of the existing single-family dwelling that is located on the subject property. The Department of Planning will have a recommendation report on this request prepared for consideration at this meeting. Ward 8.
Thank you, Mr. Newberry. Mr. Vunich?
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the department has prepared for your consideration tonight a draft letter of recommendation relating to this particular item that's been read into the record by Mr. Newberry. The item relates to an outdoor game court that is proposed on a residential lot that is part of the Meadows of Cherry Hills subdivision. It is important to note that for an outdoor game court to be approved in the city of Wildwood, there is at least 3 steps in the process. Those steps can include and often include the Planning and Zoning Commission's review and action on the outdoor game court and its components. Secondly, a zoning authorization from the city of Wildwood, which allows for the permits, if any that are necessary, need to be obtained. And the third step is oftentimes the St. Louis County Department of Public Works, the city's contractual agent for many of the permitting processes relating to buildings, plumbing, mechanical, etc. Suffice to say, the city of Wildwood takes very seriously the installation of outdoor game courts, regardless if the lot is 10,000 square feet in size on up to 4 acres and beyond. Tonight, the particular request has an additional step associated with it. In this particular case, Mr. Tuith and his wife, the owners of property, submitted an application to the Board of Adjustment. The application was necessary because a portion of the proposed game court, due to its size, extended into the rear yard setback of the lot. Ultimately, the Board of Adjustment granted the variance to the rear yard setback to accommodate the proposed size that is being presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission tonight. I bring up the matter relating to the Board of Adjustment to the commission members to advise that there were 2 conditions associated with that favorable vote by the Board of Adjustment. The first being that a stormwater management plan be provided and that that plan be reviewed and acted upon by the city's Department of Public Works. It's important to note that concerns that were expressed during the Board of Adjustment hearing process related to stormwater runoff, particularly to the north, excuse me, and the adjoining property situated there. The second condition related to screening. In this particular instance, the Board of Adjustment requested that some type of evergreen planting screen be provided so as it would be non-seasonal in nature and provide continuous screening of the outdoor game court. The items provided to you tonight as part of the draft letter of recommendation reflect those 2 conditions, and that those 2 conditions have met in terms of compliance. The Department of Public Works here at the City of Wildwood has approved the stormwater management plan, and the continuous non-seasonal screen has been submitted as well. The department would note beyond those 2 conditions in the draft letter of recommendation, it has expressed concerns regarding access to the construction site. That access is along the north edge of the petitioner's property, and the neighbor has expressed concerns as well regarding the impact that that access might have on his property as well. To address those concerns, the department has identified as part of the conditions of its favorable action recommendation that access to the construction area, the job site, be monitored, and that every effort be made to ensure that there is no trespass or problems relating to such on the abutting neighbor to the north. Given that the Board of Adjustment, the Department of Public Works here at the City of Wildwood have acted favorably upon the request, and that all of the conditions associated with both have been met, the department is again recommending that the Planning and Zoning Commission consider this particular request favorably tonight. That recommendation is premised again on compliance to the 5 conditions contained in the summary and recommendation of the draft letter of recommendation. Therefore, tonight, the department is seeking a motion and second on this matter. And after that motion and second, or the floor is open to discussion, Mr. Newberry and I will be available for any comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. Mayor Boland,
Move to approve the request as recommended by the department.
Commissioner Doppler seconds. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I would just again like to give the opportunity to any attendees if they do want to speak on this matter. I know the neighbor to the north is in attendance tonight, and I just want to make sure our protocol doesn't preclude him from speaking if he'd like.
Actually, I defer. I appreciate what Joe's doing there, but I would defer to the city attorney. I think maybe that would need to have occurred under public participation, but if not, John can say otherwise, but just to make sure we do that right. So John, do you want to say anything about that?
And I'm sorry, I'm not clear on exactly what the question is on the
So
recommendation.
the question is, we have an individual who is from the neighborhood apparently on this particular item that may want to speak to it, but we've closed public participation. And so I just want to make sure if we allow that person to speak, that that's appropriate. My hunch is it may not be, but I just wanted to run it by you before we do that.
And I appreciate the clarification on that. And that is accurate for just general public comment on matters on the agenda. The public comment portion of the meeting is the truly only appropriate place to do that unless they are the applicant.
Thank you.
And my apologies, I know it's out of the ordinary, but Mr. Boyd didn't get the opportunity I believe he expected when we met at the Board of Adjustment. So my apologies and thank you.
I don't see him making any indication that he wishes to speak. So in that case, roll call vote.
Commissioner Helfrey,
Yes.
Commissioner Ward,
Yes.
Commissioner Cohn,
Yes.
Commissioner Broyles,
Yes.
Commissioner Clayton,
Yes.
Commissioner Doppler,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Chair Beatty,
Yes.
Councilmember Brost,
Yes.
Mayor Boland.
Yes.
Thank you.
Motion passes. Thank you. Next item on the agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. PZ 4-21 Randy Buckendorf, 2057 Wild Horse Creek Road, Wildwood, Missouri 63038. A request for a conditional use permit, CUP, in the NU non-urban residence district for the retention of ground-mounted solar panels upon this 4.5 acre parcel of ground, which is located on the west side of Wild Horse Creek Road, north of Foul Zone Road. Street address 2057 Wild Horse Creek Road, locator number 23X530105. The petitioner is also seeking to retain certain roof-mounted solar panels which are so situated on the existing dwelling that such are likewise visible from an abutting roadway. These installations are required to be reviewed in accordance with Chapter 415.090 NU Non-Urban Residence District Regulations of the City of Wildwood zoning ordinance, which establishes standards and requirements for the installation of solar panels. The requested permit is required due to the proposed solar panels being of a ground-mounted design type, as well as roof-mounted panels situated on an area of the dwelling which causes them to be visible from the abutting roadway, Ward 1.
Thank you, Travis. Mr. Vunich?
Mr. Chair, I believe Mayor Boland has his hand raised, so I'll defer to him first.
Okay, Mayor Boland?
Thank you. So we had a lot of discussion about this, as you know, and essentially you're left with, as the department indicates in its report, whether the roof mounted solar panels should be approved. And Joe can certainly speak to that. I was just going to suggest, given the discussion we've had, if new Commissioner Clayton, thank you so much for being part of our team, doesn't have any questions that he may want answered from the past meetings. And if he does, then we could certainly do that. If he doesn't, then I was just going to propose that if we could get a screenshot for everyone's view as to what those panels look like on the home, so we could just sort of get focused on the issue we have at hand, that might be helpful after Joe makes his comment. So I guess I would respectfully suggest if Commissioner Clayton has any additional information he would like as to something else, we could bring that back up. If not, then once Joe makes his point, if we could just visually see, because that's what it really is all about, is the visuals of the panels on the home. If we could all get those photos placed on the screen, then we can decide probably fairly quickly how we want to go with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor Boland.
I've reviewed the data. I agree. I think a picture's worth 1,000 words. We'd probably be money ahead to move ahead.
Thank you. Mr. Vunich?
And thank you, Mr. Chair. And to Mr. Newberry, thank you for finding the appropriate photograph. If I could ask you maybe just to zoom in just a little bit more. To the members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, first, I would note that the Buckendorfs are now panelists and on screen, and I'm sure they'll have something to say regarding the roof-mounted portion of the solar energy system that's been installed on their property. For the benefit of Mr. Clayton and other members of the commission, this particular photograph is taken from Wild Horse Creek Road, looking for all intents and purposes directly west. The solar energy system that's under the subject of the conditional use permit are those panels that you see on the garage portion of the overall single-family dwelling or building. The Board of Adjustment was asked to review the location of these particular solar panels, part of the solar energy system, due to the fact that the dwelling is located in the front yard setback area. It has a variance from many years ago that authorized the addition to the dwelling to be placed there. Therefore, with the placement of the solar panels, a part of the solar energy system on the garage, they too are in the front yard setback. The Board of Adjustment granted a variance to the setback requirement to accommodate the solar panels, part of the solar energy system on the garage. A condition of that approval was that the framing and the support mechanisms be black instead of the silver or aluminum color to better match the shingles in the shingle color of the dwelling and garage. I think the photograph, other than that, is very self-explanatory, and I probably took too long explaining it, but the Board of Adjustment did act.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. Commissioner Jackson?
Okay, so is there a code or an ordinance that says you can't put them on the front facing a road? Joe Vintage, I'm asking
Yes,
you.
sir. Yes, sir. Ours
Okay.
is-
Okay, so we allow this, we have to allow everything else. Change the code to the ordinance is my opinion on it. But, you know, I'm not against the Beckendorfs, if I got your name right, Mr. and Mrs. Beckendorf, at all. But if we're going to allow it here, it's a slippery slope. And if you have a neighbor that complains in another situation in the future, you either allow it or you don't, right? So we don't have any complaints here, so we can make an exception, right? That makes total sense. Totally got it. My concern is in the future, right? Change the code or the ordinance that we're going to allow this as long as it's aesthetic. My opinion only. And I'm just worried about future events. Okay, and that's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Commissioner Jackson. Mayor Boland?
Thank you. So I share Commissioner Jackson's point about precedent. That's always an issue with decisions that we make, and particularly with this one. I think our city attorney will probably tell us that in a technical sense, the decisions we make here are based on the facts of each particular case, and that if someone were to come in and, you know, say, well, you approved it here, you have to approve it for me, that argument from a legal standpoint at least doesn't fly. But from a you know, a standpoint of our relationship with our residents, I think it is something we should be, you know, concerned about, and am happy to look at things down the road, although I will just say I would not favor changing our rule here because we spent a lot of time examining this issue, and I think we've done it at least once, if not more, and came up with a set of standards that everyone agreed upon, and we did that relatively recently. So with regard to whatever we do this evening with respect to Mr. and Mrs. Beckendorf, I would respectfully suggest that we have this rule for a reason, and we're seeing it here tonight, which is when something doesn't comply, it comes before with those rules, it comes before the commission, and we take a look at it. So all that is to say this, I appreciate definitely appreciate the comment from Commissioner Jackson relative to precedent. And I would also say that unfortunately, that is just something that we are here to do, make judgment calls, and we have lots of rules we have to apply, always being worried about precedent. And in this particular case, the rule as it is, not just the rule at hand with roof mounted, but all the rules that, not rules, the standards that come into the equation with respect to solar panels, those were arrived at with a lot of thought, and I would be very reticent to change any of them at this point. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any other comments? Mr. Vunich?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate you recognizing me. Mr. Jackson's point is very valid. Actions by any of the boards, commissions, committees, task force can have far-reaching impacts. The benefit of this particular type of improvement is that when they do create a greater impact than normally anticipated, which is why we look at roof-mounted panels facing any street or ground-mounted in any circumstance, we have the conditional use permit process that allows us to do to differentiate and to fine-tune our discussion and our action. There are 4 general criteria that are set forth in the zoning ordinance that must be met before a conditional use permit can even be considered for granting by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So the concern that will create a pattern certainly exists, regardless of whatever checks and balances are in place. But in this case, the conditional use permit process is strenuous, it's comprehensive, and it's intended to protect the city if a decision is made. Thank you.
Mayor Bullen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Given that this is in Ward 1 and has obviously presented some fairly significant issues, if there's no objection from anyone, I would be interested in the thoughts from Councilmember Brost, who is also from Ward 1, and from Commissioner Broyles, who is from Ward 1, given that this is in their ward, if they're both willing to offer those thoughts to the rest of us.
Councilman Brost?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with, Scott, your comments are right on with me. Wild Horse Creek is one of the main streets in our city. And I just don't think that, again, this was already put up and now it's coming to us. If this would have been presented, I don't think there's any way we would have approved it. I'm not going to support it. And I have solar panels on my roof, so I'm not against the solar. But I mean, we've had several of these come in front of the commission and they have not been approved. And to me, this is, I'm not sure what the right word is, but more significant or more severe as how it presents itself to one of the main roadways in our city. And one of the reasons I love living off Wild Horse Creek, I want it to stay this way. And I think it's a tragic mistake. But the fact it's a tragic mistake is not going to have me support it. So those are really my feelings on it. And I'm looking, I'm looking at what our codes and our ordinances are. And if we can rationalize this, and we can rationalize any situation throughout our entire city. And if that's where we are, then that's where we should go, but that's not where we are. So I don't plan to go there. So thank you.
Commissioner Broyles, and then I see your hand raised, Mr. and Mrs. Beckendorf. I will come to you after Ms. Broyles.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Granted a setback by the Board of Adjustments. When was this done?
Ms. Broyles, probably within the last 3 or 4 months. I don't remember the exact month, but it was 2021.
2021, and were these panels put up prior to asking for that setback?
Yes, ma'am.
They were placed there by these residents. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that what usually happens? To me, it sounds backwards that you would not go to the Board of Adjustments or ask how do I go about doing this prior to putting them on your residence? Isn't that what residents usually do?
No, ma'am. First
No?
and foremost, the majority of our residents, the vast majority of our residents and their contractors or subcontractors obtain permits before the project begins. In this particular instance, that was not the case. In talking with the petitioners, the department recommended first they go to the Board of Adjustment, because remember, with a conditional use permit, the Planning and Zoning Commission cannot reduce the underlying setback requirements of the zoning district designation of the property. That is not an authority the commission has with a conditional use permit. Therefore, the thought was, why bring it to the Planning and Zoning Commission if the setback request is denied by the Board of Adjustment? There's no need to proceed any further. The Board of Adjustment did grant the variances for both the ground mounted and roof mounted panels. And therefore, it was appropriate then to bring it forward to the Planning and Zoning Commission.
There must be a way to inform, if the city knows, there must be a way to inform residents of the procedures to go through. I don't know, was that done?
Well, certainly information regarding all of our permitting processes are available on our website. This upcoming edition of the Gazette talks about the permitting process, what needs permits, what few items don't need permits. But quite frankly, we depend on the contracting community. This is specialized work. There's several companies that do the vast majority of solar panel installations, the systems, and many of them know very much so the permitting process and follow it day in and day out according to code.
It seems that causes a catch-22 for the residents.
Well, I'm sure the petitioners can explain the circumstance better, but I believe the installer was a friend of theirs and had not done a solar panel system, a solar energy system installation in Wildwood, and assumed he did not need a permit. Again, I'll let the petitioners expand on that or correct me if I'm wrong.
Thank you for your explanation.
You're welcome.
Mr. and Mrs. Beckendorf?
Yeah, the electrician that installed the panels is on tonight, and yes, he and I do work together. I am a contractor. I was not involved in the installation of these panels or the design of the panels. He did get a St. Louis County permit. It's my understanding that he did not notice the check box that said he needed to also get the Wildwood or the local municipality approval. And I think Travis Newberry knows this and understands it. And I think we've already been through that. Perhaps some of the board members were not present or whatever, but I wish we weren't in this predicament, but they are installed. I'm not as, I guess, used to local government, but I have read through the 50-page or so amount of paper that is relating to this case, and on page 8, it states that granting of this conditional use permit for the roof mounted component of the overall installation achieves several goals of the city in regard to its environmental objectives and policies. These objectives and policies strive to limit the impacts on Wildwood's fragile environment and promote sustainable practices in terms of resource-based. The roof-mounted solar energy system reduces such impacts and are not only a benefit to the homeowner directly in terms of long-term costs, but also surrounding community by lessening the amount of pollution caused by the use of fossil fuels. And the last sentence, or the last sentence of this page is, through the department's review, it has determined the 4 criteria mentioned by Joe Vukovic set forth for granting of the conditional use permit have been met by this proposal to allow the roof-mounted solar energy system. So, I mean, it seems that we've met the roof-mounted system. We have neighbors who are likely also on this call. The neighbor to the north, Steve Mergen, who has written an email in our support this week. Chuck Gulas, also the neighbor directly across the street, has written a support email. Nancy and Dan Fisher directly across the street have written support email. Bill Easterby has done the same. Dave Douster has done the same. Kurt Parks has done the same, and these people might be on this call. I don't know. But I understand there have been some neighbors who live half a mile or more away that have been opposed. But I mean, I don't know how often they drive past our house, but I mean, the neighbors that are directly affected by this have no problem with it. You know, we've lived here 32 years and, you know, we abide by the rules, and we did not mean to have these panels installed. I don't think my contractor meant to have them installed without your approval. So, you know, I guess we're on the mercy of the court. I guess the only last thing I would say is that I know that Chuck Gulas and Nancy Fisher have vehemently opposed the fish farm that is a block or so away. If my panels are more of a nuisance to people's vision than that fish farm, then in the noise, I mean, there's something that's not right with that. And it also says in this that the ground mounted panels are a road hazard and they're 50 feet off of the road. So I'm scratching my head with that as well, but that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Mayor Boland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I would like to thank the book endorse for being here again this evening. I know this has been a process for you, and in many respects, likely not a pleasant one. All I can say is that I just hope you understand that, you know, we try to do our best to look at the interest of not only you, but the city as a whole, and that's just kind of why we're all here. Given the discussion we've had at several meetings on this, Mr. Chairman, if I could, I would ask for a motion one way or the other to support the department's recommendation on the roof mounted panels or to deny that recommendation.
Can I get a motion? Commissioner Depler?
I'll make a motion to support the department's recommendation.
Second by Commissioner Ward. Roll call vote.
Well, there's discussion, baby.
Okay, sorry, Commissioner Jackson.
And I do have one thing. So the unfortunate fact is that it does face the road and they're not supposed to, right? And just pointing that out before we go into this. I'm with Councilman Brost. I take a lot of weight into the ward that the councilman comes from. So I'll support Larry on this one.
Well, just to clarify, it's not that the road facing panels are not allowed. It's just that they're allowed with a conditional use permit. So we can review how it looks before we vote on it.
I totally have that, but
okay,
I got it. But it takes a CUP to do it. And it's not within the code or the ordinance is the fact. And so we have to make the exception. My 2 cents only.
All right. Commissioner Depler.
I mean, I just want to add my 2 cents as well. I mean, this is not the first one that have had roof mounted panels that face the road. And we have made CUPs before to allow it. And I just think, you know, as the Beckendorfs mentioned, you know, we are trying to be stewards of our city. And I think the environmental impact is a huge thing that we need to, you know, take into account. And that's why, you know, I understand that it is, you know, against our codes. But I think, you know, in the future, this is the future. We're going to be having solar panels going forward. And, you know, I know it's controversial, but that's just my 2 cents on why I support it.
Thank you.
And,
Commissioner Jackson.
And my point, change the code. That's my 2 cents on it. If we're going to do it, make them aesthetic and make it standard. It's not today.
Commissioner Brost or Councilman Brost.
Yeah, I guess to follow up on Cindy's comment, what CUPs have we approved with panels facing the road like this?
There was one on West Glen Farms Drive that we did before you were on the commission. And it's on a 1/4 acre lot, right on the main thoroughfare through that subdivision. And driving down that street, it's a 2-story house, so you kind of have to look for it, being on the 2nd floor, but they are there facing the road.
And how does that street compare with Wild Horse Creek?
It's a high density subdivision.
Okay, so it's within a subdivision.
Yeah.
It's not the main street in the city.
Well, I mean, it's one of the few streets that runs all the way between Clayton and 100.
Okay. So you would consider that more of a main street or than
It's
Wild Horse Creek?
Well, I mean, traffic wise, that part of Wild Horse Creek versus the street that's on probably is not as different as you might think.
Okay. Because I think Wild Horse Creek is really the longest street in the city, right?
Probably the way it snakes around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's been one exception in 25 years or so.
Well, I mean, we haven't, I was talking with Travis a week or 2 ago, and he made a point that we have not denied any solar panel applications to date.
I think I have. I mean, there's been ones brought in front of this commission. I think I have not approved. So,
Yeah.
Well,
no,
point of order, we actually just denied solar panels on this very property at the
Correct.
last meeting relating to being land mounted.
Sorry, I
but
meant to.
like what
I meant
Scott said,
to-
it's like if maybe the direction on this is we change our ordinances and our codes and just allow everybody to do it, and that's it. And then, because right now it's still like saying, let's approve these because they put them up by mistake, and the contractor made a mistake, the homeowners made a mistake, and if you make a mistake, then that's okay. And that's not right. So that's not a basis for approval. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Vunich?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just suggest that having the roof-mounted type of solar panels come before the Planning and Zoning Commission is appropriate. Oftentimes, we receive applications for such. We explain the process, and surprisingly, most of the solar panel contractors can figure out a way to place them elsewhere on the house, not visible from the roadway, and achieve the same energy production and savings. A good example is a set of solar panel that were proposed in the Garden Valley Farm subdivision. We processed that request to the Planning and Zoning Commission. The Planning and Zoning Commission requested that the property owners consider a different approach. They worked with their solar panel contractor, and they were able to achieve it, and the conditional use permit was withdrawn. So I think it's a workable arrangement, and certainly not all solar energy systems are approved. Many of them don't get to the Planning and Zoning Commission because of our rules and regulations. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. and Mrs. Beckendorf? You're muted. There you go.
The one thing I omitted to point out was we did not place these panels facing the road to cause anybody consternation. We're in Wildwood. We have trees to the south, a lot of them. We have a lot of trees to the west. We have a lot of trees to the north, not as many facing the road, which is more to the east. We put the panels where they're going to catch the sunlight in the best manner that they can. The amount of panels that we have right now would generate 27 kW approximately. Our electric bill is approximately $400 a month. Since we are all electric, there is no gas. So, I don't know for sure, Mayor Bowen, but I don't think they were officially denied at the last meeting. I think it was the recommendation to deny. I think we were deferring to this meeting to approve or deny both the ground mount and the roof mount as separate entities. But, if they're denied, they're denied, but we can't really put them anywhere else on the house and have them be efficient. So now I just wanted to comment that we put them on the sides of the house that would allow the most sunlight to catch them. That's all.
Thank you. Commissioner Jackson?
The ground mounts were denied, if my memory is correct, for sure. Refresh my memory, Joe, if I'm wrong.
No, you're absolutely correct, Commissioner Jackson. The Planning and Zoning Commission split the question, so to speak, and had a favorable vote to deny the ground mounted system and deferred action on the roof mounted system to tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, while you work through that, and if my memory is correct, if you put them on the back side of the house where they would be in compliance, they don't generate enough, there's not enough sunlight. Is that correct, Joe? I think that's the correct assessment. Okay.
Any other comments? Motion on the floor. Oh, Commissioner Cohn?
Just for clarification, we're going to vote to approve the solar panel system that was never officially gone through and gotten a permit to be installed. Is that correct?
Correct. The motion on the floor is just to approve the department's recommendation, which is to allow them.
Allow solar panels to be installed without going through the process of getting a permit. Understood.
Mr. Chair.
Aren't they
Mr.
already installed?
They are.
Okay.
Well, they were installed, but not with.
They were installed. Yeah.
To Commissioner Cohn's question, they were installed, but without the appropriate permit to do so beforehand. That's the answer to the question.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just add two other items, and pardon me delaying the vote, is that the Beckendorfs, based upon the recommendation in the draft letter, would have to change out the framing and supports so that they are black in color versus gray or aluminum. And then they would have to go through the permitting process with St. Louis County.
Thank you. Any other comments? Commissioner Depler and then Commissioner Helfrey.
And I thought it was mentioned before that they had already been permitted through the county, just not through the city of Wildwood.
I know the petitioners have stated that they received permits from St. Louis County. I believe the electrical contractor may have gotten a permit. They can get electrical permits, but I don't see any structural component to this. And that's one of the things they check as well. I think the permit question is a simple question. They're going to start over if the panels are approved by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And they're going to start with the permitting process here at the city of Wildwood. And then we'll watch it through St. Louis County to ensure that all components are met.
Thank you for the clarification, Joe.
Commissioner Helfrey.
I don't have any comments.
Okay.
Sorry, thanks.
That's okay. I thought you were raising your hand earlier. Roll call vote.
Can we please get clarification of the motion on the floor, which I believe is to approve, the motion is to approve the department's recommendation that the roof mounted panels be allowed as under the circumstances and as has been presented. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, would you like me to proceed?
Please.
Thank you. Commissioner Cohn,
You're on mute.
oh, I think Mr. Cohn dropped off the call.
Oh, he's
He's
back,
on
but
mute.
he's muted. Commissioner Cohn, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
Mr. Newberry, why don't you proceed forward? We'll come back to Mr. Cohn.
Okay. Commissioner Boyles,
Yes.
Commissioner Depler. Commissioner Depler,
Yes.
thank you. Commissioner Jackson,
No.
Commissioner Helfrey,
No.
Commissioner Ward,
Yes.
Commissioner Clayton,
No.
Commissioner Cohn.
No, if you heard me.
I heard you.
No,
Thank
we did.
you. Chair Beatty,
Yes.
Councilmember Brost,
No.
Mayor Bolin.
No.
The motion fails by a vote of 4-6. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda.
Mr. Chair, I'll be reading that into the record.
All righty.
An update report prepared by the Department of Planning regarding PZ 22-21 Fenerick Polgar 1770 Hornbeam Drive, Wildwood, Missouri 63005, care of Sun Pro Solar 2171 MCH Road, Mandeville, Louisiana 70471. A request for a conditional use permit CUP in the R1 1-acre resident district with a planned environment unit, PEU, street address 1770 Hornbeam Drive, locator number 19V 510315, for the installation of roof-mounted solar panels, which are to be so situated on the dwelling as to be visible from an adjoining roadway. This request is to be reviewed in accordance with Chapter 415.110 R1 1-acre resident district regulations of the City of Wildwood zoning ordinance, which establishes standards and requirements for the installation of solar panels. The requested permit is required due to the panel's placement on the side-facing area of the roofs of the dwelling and would be visible from an adjoining roadway. This particular property is located in Ward 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vinich. Mr. Newberry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, the department has prepared a report, an update report regarding the item that was just read into the record for a conditional use permit request for solar panels in the Wild Horse subdivision. The department is providing to you an update report and not its information report with recommendation. As the commission members will recall from the discussion at the public hearing for this item, the commission identified the importance of the input of the subdivision trustees, which was in question at the time of the public hearing. The department had hoped to have those questions answered so it could incorporate them into the information report recommendation. However, the department wasn't able to get the information it needed in the time due to some unforeseen circumstances. As you'll note from the advertisement that Mr. Boone has just read into the record, the petitioner's representatives are located in New Orleans and were impacted by the hurricane. So that was part of the problem. So again, the department's not seeking any action on this item. The purpose of the agenda item is just to provide the update to the commission so the commission can understand where the project is. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Discussion or move on?
Mr. Chair, if there's any questions of Mr. Newberry or I, we'd be glad to answer them. Otherwise, there's no action and we can move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have any questions on this? Seeing none, I guess we can move on to the next item.
Mr. Chair, with your permission, I would ask Mr. Young, do we need to read all 10 of the public hearing advertisements for the next item, since it is an update report only? Thank you.
I apologize for the delay in getting that back up. I couldn't find the screen. No, I don't believe you need to read all of them just for an update.
I speak for all of the commission members. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Newberry?
Well, Mr.
Or
Chair, with
Mr.
your permission, I'm going to read it into the
Okay.
record. So as we get what we need in there, but nothing else. An update report prepared by the Department of Planning regarding PZ 10-21 through 19-21 Planning and Zoning Commission, care of the Department of Planning and Parks, City of Wildwood, Missouri, which is intended to provide the Planning and Zoning Commission, as well as members of the public, information regarding the consideration of the application of the Special Circumstances Overlay District, SCOD, to certain identified properties within the City of Wildwood, as well as to allow the city attorney and the Department of Planning and Parks to respond to previous questions regarding the same. These particular 10 properties are located in wards 2 and 4. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Newberry, or discussion?
Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I'm going to just give a brief overview and then allow any questions or comments.
Okay.
Mr. Chair and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, as you know, back at the beginning of summer on June 7th, a public hearing was held regarding these particular properties that are identified in detail in the update report. At the conclusion of the public hearing, there were a number of questions that had been raised, not only by the public, but the Planning and Zoning Commission members. One of the commission members, Ms. Helfrey, was kind enough to record those questions and submitted them to the Department of Planning for response. The department has been trying to engage the Environmental Protection Agency to assist in answering some of those questions. And through the efforts of Mr. Cross, our city administrator, the Department of Planning, the city attorney, and Mr. Cross were able to have a conversation with the Environmental Protection Agency and members of the Missouri Department of Natural Resources last week. That conversation helped and allowed for some of the questions to receive more answers and more explanations. However, there is still some outstanding items that we're expecting from the Environmental Protection Agency that will conclude the review of these questions and their explanations. Tonight, the department has responded where it can relative to those questions. I know that Mr. Mark Court, who spoke during the public comment session, questioned some of those responses and the accuracy. Certainly, the department stands by the answers and the accuracy associated with them. And I would note that both the city attorney and our city administrator, along with Mr. Newberry, have also reviewed the responses that were prepared by the department. So tonight, I don't intend to go through each and every one of them. I would prefer if any of the Planning and Zoning Commission members had questions regarding them, the department, as well as the city administrator and Mr. Young would be glad to try to respond to them at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Runich. Open the floor for questions or comments. Seeing none. Oh, go ahead.
I apologize, I interrupted you. Seeing no questions or comments, just an update on timing. As I mentioned, Mr. Cross, Mr. Young, and I did have a conversation last week with representatives of both the federal and state oversight agencies. We are expecting information to be provided from that conversation that was held last week. My best guess is that the department will have the information report relative to some of these properties available for consideration by the Planning and Zoning Commission at the first meeting in November. Thank you.
Thank you. So I unfortunately was not at that June meeting. The properties, I guess it looks like four properties on the south side of Strecker Road. Are those basically being considered because of the contaminants found on the one, and then the other ones because they're downstream of the original?
Two of the properties were owned by Grover Callahan, who was an employee of Russell Bliss. One of the properties, the property without the single-family dwelling, actually was on the national priorities list. There have been at least 2 cleanups of that property conducted by EPA and MDNR, and most recently was delisted from the national priorities list. The other property owned by Grover Callahan abuts that site. And you are correct, Mr. Chair. 2 of the properties on Idle Rock Farm Road are downstream from the Callahan property, Farmer Callahan property that was on the national priorities list. During our conversation with EPA and MDNR last week, we did discuss those downstream properties. And as I say, I'm expecting information from the federal agency as well as the state agency that will allow the department to provide an improved explanation and hopefully respond to any and all questions at that time.
Thank you. And then just for my clarification, is the Bliss property still on the national priority list?
Yes, there are two of the Bliss properties that are on the national priorities list still. And then there is one of the 3 properties that form Strecker Forest that has a new environmental covenant placed upon it because of contaminants.
Thank you.
And one last comment, Mr. Chair, the grid that was mentioned during the public comment session by Mr. Markcourt, I've completed a preliminary one. I will probably have that out to you either at the October meeting, if not before, so you can kind of start reviewing it from the perspective of your questions. And hopefully when we do get to the information report, it will help you in fashioning your decision.
Thank you. Commissioner Helfrey?
Joe, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for all the time that you and Travis are spending getting the information for us. I know that it's a lot of work. I would also just want to reiterate that I hope that when we do get this information, that we have plenty of time to look it all over and digest it before we, vote or anything. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, with your permission, to Ms. Helfrey's point, the intent of the department is not to rush this process. That's why it intentionally provided the responses to the questions now. It hopes to have the matrix sooner than later, meaning before the October meeting, but no later than the October meeting. And certainly as EPA and MDNR provide information, we'll submit that to you so you can have as much time as you need to review it. There are reams and reams and reams of information. It's very technical in nature, and I'll be the first to explain to the commission I don't understand it all. I understand some of it, but again, we're going to count on EPA and MDNR to kind of fill in the blanks so that when the information is provided to you for consideration, you have what we believe is the best information available, and it's being provided to you in a format that's understandable. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Jackson?
Yeah, Mr. Vunich, what are the ramifications of the two properties I got letters on anyway? If they're excluded or included, I mean, what happens to them if what they're saying is accurate and it shouldn't be included? And I guess, do we even have the power to not include them in the SCOD? Because this is like a federal thing on the cleanup site. I'm just really confused.
First and foremost, the authority relative to the application of the overlay district lies solely with the Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council. So yes, you do. You can make a decision to apply the overlay district or not apply it on any of these first 10 properties. The intent of the city attorney, the city administrator, Mr. Newberry, and I is to give you irrefutable evidence that will support our recommendation or not. In terms of the 2 properties you received letters from, I assume the letters again were from Mr. Marquardt because I received them as well. The intent there is to identify them for consideration. Their placement on the public hearing docket, the discussion associated with them, is not a foregone conclusion that the special circumstances overlay district will be applicable to one, to the other, or both. Again, we are just identifying those properties that have characteristics that at one time either place them as a Superfund site or in such close proximity without all of the information. We believe that there could be contaminants on them, traces of contaminants, or they could be clean and suitable for full residential or other use. Thank you.
If there's no other comments, move on to the next agenda item. Mr. Vunich?
I'm going to let Mr. Newberry read the brief
Okay.
title.
Thank you. An update of the master plan's application over the last 5 years since its last update and adoption in 2016. Status of implementation of goals, objectives, and strategies of this planning document, all wards.
Thank you. Mr. Vunich?
Mr. Chair, thank you. As the Planning and Zoning Commission is aware, the city has had a master plan that has guided a great deal of the decision-making processes associated with City Council, this board, this commission, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and all other boards, committees, task force, and authorities. The last update of the master plan was completed in 2016. The next update will be completed in 2026 on a 10-year cycle that is both established by the city's charter as well as state statute. At the halfway point, 5 years after the adoption of the last update and previous updates, the planning department has provided to the Planning and Zoning Commission a scorecard, so to speak. Primarily, the scorecard identifies any of the goals, objectives, and policies that were added, modified, or otherwise altered. Those are the subject of the update tonight. There are approximately 68 goals, objectives, and policies that were changed from 2006 to 2016. And tonight, at the 5-year mark in that 10-year timeframe, the department is providing the update. It would note that in terms of actions, there are 5 principal actions that have been identified. It is either implemented, ongoing, implemented and ongoing, completed, or awaiting action. Of that last action item, awaiting action, there are only 3 of the 68 goals, objectives, and policies that were modified, changed, or added that are still not underway at this time. And those relate to an inspection process for packaged sanitary sewer treatment plants, a reoccupancy program for existing single-family dwellings, and then finally, the city's position when regional roadway system changes are proposed either by federal or state agencies. Again, none are being proposed at this time. That's why it's awaiting action. The department does not intend to go through all 68 of the goals, objectives, and policies. It has provided the wording associated with each. information relating to the implementation, and then some commentary as well. So therefore, tonight, the department is here to answer any questions, respond to comments, and certainly any direction the Planning and Zoning Commission would like to provide at this 5-year component of the 10-year process. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vunich. Any questions? Seeing none, I guess we can move on to the next item on the agenda.
Mr. Newberry, would you like to read the?
Yes, sir. Nominating Committee recommendation for this 2021/2022 Commission year and its officers, all awards.
Thank you. Mr. Vunich.
Mr. Chair, I will let the nominating committee take it from here. Members that participated that night were Mr. Chair, Mr. Beatty, Ms. Helfrey, and Ms. Broyles. Thank you.
Thank you. So as the nominating committee, we came up with the suggestion of myself, Dave Beatty as chair, Ed Cohn as vice chair, and Vicky Helfrey as secretary. Are there any other nominations from the floor? Seeing none, I guess a motion to approve the three of us as the leaders for the next year.
I so moved that those 3 officers take their positions.
Thank you, Commissioner Ward. Commissioner Broyles, second. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Commissioner Depler,
Yes.
Commissioner Jackson,
Yes.
Commissioner Helfrey,
Yes.
Commissioner Ward,
Yes.
Commissioner Cohn.
Abstain.
Abstain. Thank you. Commissioner Broyles. Commissioner Broyles.
You're muted.
Yes.
Thank you. Commissioner Clayton,
Yes.
Chair Beatty,
Abstain.
Councilmember Gross,
Yes.
Mayor Boland.
Yes, and I would like to thank the 3 individuals for being willing to devote even more time to our city, as well as all of you.
Thank you. I enjoy doing it.
I echo that.
Department would like to thank the members of the nominating committee. It wasn't as easy as the memo kind of indicated, but we got where we needed to be. So thanks to all 4 of you for participating.
You're welcome. I believe that is the end of the agenda. Any comments from anyone before we adjourn, or a motion to adjourn?
Nice job, Edie. Motion to adjourn.
Commissioner Depler seconds. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Yeah, any opposed? Any abstain? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right. Have a good night, everyone.